The penthouse suite overlooked Seoul's glittering skyline, but Dubin Park couldn't appreciate the view. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in his custom Tom Ford suit, hands trembling as he stared at his phone. Another text from his ex-girlfriend, the third this month. "I'm sorry I ran. I just couldn't handle it. You understand, right?" He understood perfectly. He always understood. 29 years old, heir to Park Industries' telecommunications empire, worth $8 billion, blessed with the kind of face that landed him on Forbes' most eligible bachelors list 3 years running and cursed with a body that sent every woman fleeing once intimacy loomed on the horizon. "Mr. Park, your appointment is here," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Dubin closed his eyes. Dr. Diamond Richardson. The therapist his sister had insisted he see. The fifth therapist in 2 years, though he'd never told his family why the others hadn't worked out. How could he explain that discussing his problem with women, when all his therapists had been women, felt like emotional waterboarding? But his sister swore this Dr. Richardson was different. "She specializes in intimacy issues," she'd said. "She's American, incredibly professional, and she doesn't intimidate easily. Trust me." He straightened his shoulders, adjusted his platinum cufflinks and nodded to himself. "Send her in." The door opened. Dubin turned and for the first time in 18 months he forgot to breathe. Dr. Diamond Richardson was not what he expected. She glided into his office with the kind of confidence that couldn't be purchased or performed. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant twist, with a few curls framing her face in a way that seemed both deliberate and effortless. She wore a cream silk blouse tucked into wide-leg caramel trousers, with a structured blazer that hugged her curves perfectly. Her skin was a rich, warm brown that seemed to glow under the office lights, and when she smiled, her full lips revealed perfect white teeth that contrasted beautifully with her complexion. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Deep brown, intelligent, and entirely unimpressed by his wealth, his looks, or his obvious discomfort. "Mr. Park," she said, extending her hand. Her voice was smooth and warm, with a slight southern lilt that softened her words. "I'm Dr. Richardson. Thank you for seeing me." He took her hand, noting how small it felt in his, how warm. "Thank you for coming." She held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and he saw something flicker in her expression. Curiosity, perhaps, or assessment. Then she released his hand and settled into the chair across from his desk, crossing her legs and pulling out a leather-bound notebook. "I understand you've seen several therapists before me," she said, diving straight in. "May I ask why those relationships didn't work out?" Dubin returned to his chair, grateful for the desk between them. "They weren't a good fit." She wrote something down, and he found himself mesmerized by the elegant movement of her fingers, the gold bracelets at her wrist catching the light. "Your sister mentioned you're dealing with relationship anxiety, specifically around physical intimacy." His jaw tightened. "She told you that?" "She's worried about you." Diamond looked up, and there was no judgment in her eyes, only professional concern. "Mr. Park, I want to be clear about something from the start. Whatever we discuss in these sessions is completely confidential. I'm not here to judge you, analyze your worth, or write a tell-all book. I'm here because you're struggling with something and I might be able to help. But only if you're honest with me. And if I can't be?" She smiled slightly. "Then we're both wasting our time and you're wasting a considerable amount of money. I charge $500 an hour, and from what your sister told me, you've already invested several thousand in therapists who haven't helped. So let me ask you directly, do you want help, or do you want to keep pretending everything's fine while you avoid relationships and wonder why you're miserable?" The bluntness shocked him. Then unexpectedly he laughed. "You don't mince words. Life's too short, and your problem, whatever it is, won't fix itself." She leaned forward slightly. "So, are we doing this, or should I bill you for this hour and go enjoy Seoul's shopping district?" Dubin studied her for a long moment. There was something about her directness, her complete lack of reverence for his status, that made him feel almost normal. As if he were just a man with a problem, not a billionaire with an embarrassing secret. "I have a condition," he said slowly. "A medical condition that affects my physical appearance in a way that has made every relationship I've attempted since I was 21 fall apart." Diamond's expression didn't change. "Go on." "When women discover me, they leave. Sometimes immediately. Sometimes they try to adjust, but they can't. The last woman I was seeing, she was kind about it. Said she cared about me but couldn't move forward. The one before her told her friends, and within a week, there were rumors circulating in my social circles." "What is the condition?" He stood abruptly, walking back to the window. I have macrophilus syndrome. My penis is significantly larger than normal. Not in a way that's appealing or manageable. In a way that's frightening and, for most women, makes intercourse impossible or extremely painful. The words hung in the air. He waited for the awkward silence, the stammering, the barely concealed horror or fascination that usually followed this confession. Instead, Diamond said calmly, "I see. And you've consulted with urologists about this?" He turned, startled. "Yes. Multiple specialists. They've all confirmed there's no medical intervention that would help significantly. I could pursue reduction surgery, but the risks are substantial, and the results aren't guaranteed." She wrote something down, her expression thoughtful but not shocked. "How has this affected your psychological well-being? How do you think?" The words came out more bitter than he intended. "I can attract women easily. I'm wealthy, I'm told I'm attractive, I have good conversation. But the moment things become intimate, I see their faces change. Fear. Discomfort. Sometimes they try to hide it, but I always know. And then they leave or I push them away before they can reject me outright. That must be incredibly isolating." The gentleness in her voice cracked something inside him. He sank back into his chair, suddenly exhausted. "I've accepted that I'll probably never have a normal relationship. Never marry, never have children. My family keeps pressuring me to settle down, but how can I explain this to them? How can I tell my mother that her eldest son is, for all practical purposes, unable to perform the basic human function of intimacy?" Diamond set down her pen and looked at him directly. "Mr. Park, what you're describing is a real medical condition with real psychological consequences. But I want to challenge one assumption you've made, that this condition makes you unable to have intimacy or relationships. What it means is that you'll need to find a partner who's willing to be patient, creative, and committed to finding solutions together. It means traditional intercourse might not be the primary form of physical intimacy in your relationship. But it doesn't mean you're broken or unlovable." He stared at her. "You make it sound simple." "I didn't say it was simple. I said it was possible." She leaned back. "Here's what I'd like to propose. We meet twice a week for the next month. We work on unpacking the shame and anxiety you've built up around this issue. We explore your relationship patterns and what you're really looking for in a partner. And we develop strategies for communicating about your condition in ways that feel authentic and empowering rather than apologetic. And you think that will help? I think you're carrying a tremendous amount of pain and isolation that's preventing you from even imagining a different outcome. So yes, I think it will help. The question is whether you're willing to do the work." Dubin looked at this beautiful, direct, utterly unflappable woman and felt something he hadn't felt in years. "Oh, when can we start?" he asked. Diamond Richardson had been having the worst year of her professional life. It started when her fiancé Dr. Marcus Chin, a fellow therapist she'd met during her postdoctoral fellowship, left her for his dental hygienist 3 weeks before their wedding. The humiliation of canceling vendors, returning gifts, and explaining to her family why there would be no destination wedding in Jamaica was excruciating enough. But then Marcus had the audacity to suggest they could still be friends and colleagues, as if he hadn't just torpedoed her entire life plan. She threw herself into her practice in Atlanta, building a specialty in intimacy and relationship counseling that quickly gained her a reputation as one of the most effective therapists in the Southeast. But after 2 years of 60-hour weeks and watching couple after couple work through their problems while she nursed her own broken heart, she was burnt out. Her best friend Keisha had suggested a change of scenery. "Girl, you need to get out of Atlanta. Clear your head. Maybe take on some international clients, see the world a little." The opportunity came through a colleague who'd relocated to Seoul. "I have clients here who specifically request English-speaking therapists, especially for sensitive issues. The pay is excellent, the city is incredible, and frankly, you look like you need a reset." So Diamond packed up her life, sublet her condo, and moved to South Korea for what was supposed to be a 6-month consulting stint. She'd been there for 3 months when she received a call from Suyun Park, heir to a fashion conglomerate and a force of nature in her own right. "My brother needs help," Suyun had said without preamble. "He's depressed, isolated, and refusing to acknowledge there's a problem. I need someone who won't be impressed by his money or his face and will actually push him to be honest. My sources say that's you." "What's his issue?" Diamond had asked. "He won't tell me. But I know it's serious and I know it's affecting his entire life. Please, I'll pay whatever you charge." Diamond had agreed, more out of professional curiosity than anything else. Rich, handsome men with mysterious problems were usually dealing with addiction, sexual compulsion, or profound narcissism. She was prepared for any of those. She was not prepared for Dubin Park's vulnerability, his genuine pain, or the way her heart had squeezed when he'd confessed his curse with such raw desperation. And she certainly wasn't prepared for how her body had responded to him from the moment she walked into his office. Diamond prided herself on her professionalism. She'd counseled hundreds of clients over the years, many of them attractive men, and never once had she felt anything beyond clinical interest. But something about Dubin, the sadness in his eyes, the tension in his broad shoulders, the way his voice dropped when he spoke about his loneliness, had awakened something in her she'd thought Marcus had killed. After that first session, she'd gone home to her temporary apartment in Gangnam and poured herself a large glass of wine. "You're being ridiculous," she told herself. "He's a client. An incredibly vulnerable client who just confessed something deeply personal. Whatever you're feeling is just empathy. Maybe some misplaced attraction because he's objectively gorgeous. But that's it." She'd convinced herself she was right. Until the second session, when Dubin showed up in a navy blue suit that fit him so perfectly it should have been illegal, and smiled at her with genuine warmth that made her stomach flip. "Dr. Richardson," he'd said, "I've been thinking about what you said. About the possibility of finding someone who could accept me." And she'd settled into her chair, notebook ready, every inch the professional therapist. "I think I've been afraid to even hope for that. It seemed easier to just accept that I'd be alone. But our conversation gave me something I haven't had in a long time. A reason to believe things could be different." She'd looked at him then, really looked, and seen not just a wealthy, handsome man, but someone who'd been deeply wounded and was tentatively reaching toward healing. And she'd felt her professional detachment begin to crack. Over the next few weeks, their sessions became the highlight of her week. Dubin was intelligent, funny when he let his guard down, and surprisingly insightful about his own patterns. He talked about his childhood, growing up with enormous privilege but also enormous pressure. His father had built Park Industries from nothing, and the expectation was that Dubin would not only maintain but expand the empire. "I think that's part of why this condition feels so devastating," he admitted during their fourth session. "I'm supposed to be perfect. The perfect son, the perfect businessman, the perfect public figure. And I can't even have a normal sex life. It feels like the ultimate failure." "Perfection is a myth," Diamond had said gently. "And tying your worth to your sexual performance is a trap that keeps you locked in shame. Your value as a person, as a man, has nothing to do with your anatomy. Easy to say when you're not the one dealing with it." "You're right. I can't know exactly what you're experiencing. But I can tell you that every person I've ever counseled who's found genuine happiness has done so by accepting their imperfections and finding people who love them not despite those imperfections but as a complete package. Your condition is part of you, yes. But it's not all of you." He'd studied her with those intense dark eyes. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make everything seem manageable. Like no problem is too big to solve." She'd smiled. "Because I genuinely believe that. Humans are remarkably resilient and adaptable. We just need to stop fighting ourselves long enough to see it." But even as she spoke those words, Diamond knew she was in dangerous territory. She was thinking about Dubin outside of their sessions. Wondering what he did in his free time, whether he liked jazz, if he'd ever been to the jazz club she'd discovered in 81. She found herself dressing more carefully on session days, choosing outfits that were still professional but that she knew looked good on her. And she noticed him noticing. It was subtle at first. The way his gaze would linger on her face when she spoke. How he'd lean forward unconsciously when she shared something personal. The small smile that played at his lips when she made a joke. During their 8th session something shifted. They'd been discussing his patterns in relationships, how he tended to self-sabotage before women could reject him. "I think," he said slowly, "I need to learn to trust that someone could know everything about me and still choose to stay." "That's a big step," Diamond acknowledged. "How do you think you could start building that trust?" He looked directly at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "By being honest about what I'm feeling. Even when it's scary." "What are you feeling?" The silence stretched between them, charged with something Diamond knew she should shut down immediately. This was the moment where a good therapist redirected, set boundaries, reminded both parties of the professional nature of their relationship. Instead she waited. "I'm feeling like these sessions are the best part of my week," Dubin said quietly. "I'm feeling like you're the first person in years who's seen me as a complete person rather than a problem to solve or an asset to acquire. And I'm feeling something else that I know I probably shouldn't say. Dubin." She used his first name without thinking, dropping the formal address for the first time. I know, he said quickly. I know this is inappropriate. You're my therapist. There are boundaries. I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. I needed to be honest. The way you keep telling me to be. Diamond should have ended the session right there. Should have explained that they needed to terminate their therapeutic relationship immediately and that she'd refer him to another therapist. It was the ethical thing to do, the professional thing. Instead, she heard herself say, I think we need to talk about what happens next. What do you mean? She took a deep breath. I mean that I'm feeling something too. Something that's not appropriate for a therapist to feel for her client. And we have two choices. I can refer you to someone else and we can pretend this conversation never happened, or I stop being your therapist and we see what happens when we're just two people who've spent the last 2 months getting to know each other. Dubin leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. What do you want, Diamond? The sound of her name in his voice, with that slight accent that made it sound exotic and intimate, sent a shiver down her spine. I want to stop being your therapist, she said, making the decision even as the words left her mouth. I want to take you to this jazz club I found in 81. I want to have a conversation that's not about your trauma or your treatment plan. And I want to see if what I'm feeling is real or just some weird transference thing that will evaporate the moment we're outside this office. A slow smile spread across Dubin's face, transforming him from handsome to absolutely devastating. When? Now, Diamond said, closing her notebook. Right now. Before I change my mind and remember all the reasons this is a terrible idea. He stood immediately, pulling his phone from his pocket. I'll tell my driver to meet us downstairs. No driver, Diamond said firmly, standing as well. If we're doing this, we're doing it like normal people. We'll take the subway like everyone else. Dubin looked at her as if she'd suggested they fly to the moon. I haven't taken the subway in 10 years. Then it's about time you remembered what it's like to be a normal person in your own city. She grabbed her bag. Come on, billionaire. Let me show you how the other 99% lives. The subway was crowded with evening commuters, and Dubin Park, heir to an $8 billion fortune, couldn't remember the last time he'd been this happy. Diamond had been right. Wearing a cap and removing his suit jacket made him virtually invisible among the throngs of well-dressed soul professionals. He stood close to her in the packed car, one hand gripping the overhead rail, acutely aware of every point where their bodies almost touched. She was explaining something about the history of Seoul's subway system, her voice animated, her hands moving expressively even in the confined space. He wasn't really listening to the words. He was just watching her, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something she found interesting, the curve of her neck, the way she unconsciously tucked a stray curl behind her ear. Are you even listening to me? She asked suddenly, catching him staring. No, he admitted, grinning. I'm too busy wondering how I got this lucky. She rolled her eyes, but he saw the pleased smile she tried to hide. We haven't even had our first date yet and you're already laying it on thick. This isn't our first date? This is a highly irregular therapy session that I'll probably regret tomorrow, she corrected, but her tone was teasing. So I should enjoy it while it lasts? Something like that. The jazz club was tucked into a basement in 81, the kind of place tourists never found but locals guarded jealously. The walls were exposed brick, the lighting was low and warm, and a quartet was setting up on the small stage. Diamond led him to a corner booth, and a server appeared almost immediately. Whiskey neat, Dubin said. Make that too, Diamond added. When the server left, Dubin raised an eyebrow. I didn't picture you as a whiskey drinker. There's a lot you don't know about me, she said. That's kind of the problem with the therapist-client relationship. It's all one-way disclosure. So tell me, who is Diamond Richardson when she's not counseling broken billionaires? She laughed, a sound that seemed to resonate in his chest. I'm from Atlanta originally. Grew up in a big family, 3 sisters, 1 brother, more cousins than I can count. My mama is a teacher, my daddy is a pastor, and they were not thrilled when I decided to become a therapist instead of a doctor or lawyer. Why a therapist? Because I'm nosy, she said with a grin. And because I grew up watching people in my community struggle with problems they didn't have the language or resources to address. Mental health wasn't really discussed in black churches when I was growing up. If you were depressed, you prayed harder. If you had anxiety, you had a crisis of faith. I wanted to change that narrative. That's beautiful. She shrugged, but he could see the emotion in her eyes. It's important to me. We all carry trauma, but not everyone has the tools to process it. I want to be someone who provides those tools. Their whiskeys arrived and they toasted. The liquid burned pleasantly down Dubin's throat. What about you? Diamond asked. When you're not running a telecommunications empire, who is Dubin Park? He considered the question, realized no one had asked him that in years. Honestly, I don't know anymore. I used to paint. Did you know that? She shook her head. I was pretty good actually. My art teacher in high school thought I should pursue it seriously. But my father needed me in the business, and painting didn't seem like a practical career path for a Park family heir. He swirled the whiskey in his glass. I gave it up when I was 18. Haven't picked up a brush since. That's sad. It's practical. Practical doesn't mean it can't be sad. She reached across the table and her fingers brushed his hand. The touch was light, brief, but it sent electricity through his entire body. You should paint again. Not for your father, not for your career. Just for yourself. Maybe I will. This is perfect, she said softly, her head on his shoulder. It is. I never expected this, you know. When I moved to Seoul, I thought I'd work, see some sights, and go home when my contract was up. I definitely didn't think I'd meet someone. Someone. He turned her face to his. Or me specifically? You specifically, you arrogant man. But she was smiling as she said it, and then she was kissing him, soft and sweet, tasting like Cajun spices and wine. They'd been careful about physical intimacy. Dubin didn't want to push, knowing his condition would eventually need to be addressed in a new context now that they were romantic partners rather than therapist and client. And Diamond seemed content to take things slowly, letting their relationship build on friendship and emotional connection. But 6 weeks in, as they stood on her balcony kissing under the stars, things deepened. Diamond's fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. Dubin's hands roamed her back, feeling the curves of her body through the thin fabric of her dress. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, there was a question in her eyes. Do you want to come inside? She asked quietly. I mean inside. Not just for more jambalaya. His heart was pounding. Diamond, we need to talk about. I know. And we will. But right now, I just want to be close to you. Whatever that looks like. We'll figure it out together, okay? The trust in her voice, the acceptance, made his throat tight with emotion. Okay. They moved to her bedroom, and Dubin's hands were shaking as he helped her unzip her dress. She turned to face him, letting it fall away, and he forgot how to breathe. She was perfect, curves and softness and strength all in one beautiful package. Your turn, she said, reaching for his shirt buttons. Diamond, I need you to understand. I know about your condition, remember? I was your therapist, and now I'm your girlfriend. Nothing about your body is going to scare me away. But when he finally undressed, standing vulnerable before her, he saw her eyes widen. Not with fear exactly, but with surprise, and he felt shame begin to creep in. Then she stepped forward and took his face in her hands. Hey, look at me. I'm not going anywhere. Do you hear me? We're going to figure this out together. And they did. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't the kind of passionate, uncomplicated intimacy portrayed in movies. There were awkward moments, false starts, and conversations about what would work and what wouldn't. But Diamond approached everything with patience, creativity, and a matter-of-fact attitude that gradually dissolved Dubin's shame. There are so many ways to be intimate, she said, lying beside him afterward, both of them tangled in her sheets. Intercourse is just one option. And honestly, what we just did was pretty amazing. Dubin pulled her close, kissing her forehead. You're pretty amazing. I know, she said with a smile. But you're not so bad yourself. From that night on they were inseparable. Dubin rearranged his schedule around her availability. Diamond started turning down evening clients so she could spend more time with him. They fell into an easy rhythm: dinners at hidden restaurants, lazy Sundays in bed, long walks along the Han River, movie nights at his penthouse where they'd sprawl on his ridiculously comfortable couch and argue about plot holes. His family noticed the change immediately. You seem happy, his sister Suyun said during a family dinner 8 weeks into his relationship with Diamond. Like, genuinely happy. I haven't seen you smile this much in years. I am happy, Dubin admitted. Does this have anything to do with Dr. Richardson? She grinned at him. Because I noticed you stopped seeing her for therapy, but your mood has gotten exponentially better. We're dating, he said simply. His mother nearly dropped her chopsticks. Dating? Your therapist. Former therapist, he corrected. She ended our professional relationship before we started seeing each other romantically. Everything was completely ethical. And? His father leaned forward, rare interest in his eyes. Is it serious? Dubin thought about Diamond laughing in his kitchen that morning as she attempted to teach him to make pancakes. Thought about the way she fit perfectly under his arm. Thought about how she knew his darkest secret and hadn't flinched. Yes, he said. It's serious. His mother clapped her hands together. I want to meet her. Dinner next week. Bring her here. Mom? Dubin, you've been alone for so long. If this woman makes you happy, I want to know her. Please. So the following week, Dubin brought Diamond to meet his family. He was nervous, even though he'd warned her extensively about his mother's intensity, his father's bluntness, and his sister's tendency to ask inappropriate questions. Diamond just laughed. Honey, I grew up in a black family in the South. I can handle anything your family throws at me. She was right. His mother loved her immediately, drawn to Diamond's warmth and confidence. His father, usually reserved, actually laughed at her jokes. Aunt Suyun cornered her after dinner with wine and didn't let her go for 2 hours, the two of them talking like old friends. She's wonderful, his mother said later, pulling Dubin aside. She's smart, she's kind, and she clearly adores you. Don't let this one go. I don't plan to, Dubin said. And he didn't. 3 months into their relationship, Dubin knew he wanted to marry Diamond Richardson. It was an absurd realization given how quickly they'd come together, but he'd never been more certain of anything in his life. This woman, who'd seen him at his most vulnerable and loved him anyway, who made him laugh and challenged him and made him want to be better. He couldn't imagine his life without her. But he had no idea how to propose. You're overthinking it, Suyun told him when he called her in a panic. Diamond is practical. She doesn't need some elaborate proposal. But I want it to be special. She deserves special. Then make it meaningful. Incorporate things that matter to both of you. He spent 2 weeks planning. He bought the ring, a stunning emerald-cut diamond set in platinum, with smaller stones along the band that reminded him of stars. He arranged for a private dinner at the jazz club where they'd had their first date. He even commissioned a painting for her, his first in over a decade, showing a sunset over Seoul from her apartment balcony. The night of the proposal, Diamond arrived at the jazz club thinking they were just having a regular date night. She wore a stunning black dress with gold accessories, her hair swept up, and Dubin's breath caught when he saw her. You look incredible, he said, kissing her cheek. You're acting weird, she said, eyes narrowing. What's going on? Nothing. Can't I take my girlfriend out for a nice dinner? You can, but you're doing that thing where you touch your cufflinks when you're nervous. Spill. He laughed, caught. You know me too well. I do. So whatever you're planning, just do it. You're making me nervous. So he did. Right there in the entrance to the jazz club, with other patrons walking past them, he got down on one knee and pulled out the ring. Dubin, Diamond gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Diamond Richardson, he said, his voice surprisingly steady. 3 months ago you walked into my office and changed my entire life. You saw past my wealth, my appearance, my carefully constructed walls, and you saw me. The real me. The broken, scared, lonely me. And you didn't run. You stayed, and you loved me, and you made me believe that I could have the life I'd given up hope of ever having. Tears were streaming down her face now, and he felt his own eyes burning. You're the most incredible woman I've ever met. You're brilliant and compassionate and funny, and you call me on my nonsense. You challenge me to be better. You make me want to be better. And I want to spend the rest of my life becoming the man you deserve. He opened the ring box and the diamond caught the light, sparkling brilliantly. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my best friend? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me? Diamond was full on crying now, mascara running, not caring who was watching. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, you ridiculous man. Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring on her finger, and then he was standing and she was in his arms, and they were kissing as other patrons applauded and someone whistled. When they finally broke apart, both laughing through their tears, the club manager was standing there smiling. Your table is ready, Mr. Park. And congratulations. The dinner was perfect. The quartet played all of Diamond's favorite songs. They laughed and cried and talked about their future. Where they'd live, whether they'd have children, how they'd blend their lives together. I want to stay in Seoul, Diamond said. At least for a while. I've built a practice here and I love this city. We'll stay as long as you want, Dubin said. My work is flexible. We can split time between Seoul and Atlanta if you want to be close to your family. I like that idea. She looked down at her ring, turning her hand to catch the light. This is real, isn't it? We're really doing this. My family is going to lose their minds. My mama has been bugging me about settling down since Marcus left. When I tell her I'm engaged to a Korean billionaire, she's going to think I'm joking. Should I come with you when you tell them? Face the interrogation in person? Absolutely. If I have to survive your family dinners, you have to survive Sunday dinner at my mama's house. She grinned. Fair warning, my daddy is going to grill you like you're applying for the CIA. I can handle it. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing just above the ring. I can handle anything as long as I have you. Later, back at his penthouse, they lay in bed tangled together, talking in the darkness. Do you ever worry? Diamond asked quietly. About our future, I mean. About whether we can make this work long-term. Sometimes, Dubin admitted. But then I remember that we've already navigated the hardest part. We've been honest about my condition, we've figured out intimacy in our own way, and we've built something real. Everything else feels manageable by comparison. She shifted to look at him, her face barely visible in the moonlight streaming through the windows. I never thought I'd feel this way about anyone again. After Marcus, I was so convinced I'd just focus on my career, maybe date casually but never really open my heart again. And then you happened. Are you glad I happened? I'm glad you happened. She kissed him softly. I'm glad I took that call from your sister. I'm glad I decided to stop being your therapist and take a risk on us. I'm glad for all of it. Even the awkward sexual navigation? She laughed. Even that. Especially that, actually. It forced us to communicate in ways most couples never do. We had to be creative and vulnerable and patient with each other from the start. That's a pretty solid foundation. You're amazing, you know that? I know. And you're pretty amazing too, Dubin Park. Now kiss me again. I want to practice being your fiancé. They were married 6 months later in a ceremony that blended Korean and Southern traditions. Diamond wore a white gown for the ceremony and changed into a hanbok for the reception. Dubin wore a traditional Korean suit, though he drew the line at the hat, much to his mother's dismay. Diamond's family flew in from Atlanta. Her parents, her siblings, her aunts and uncles and cousins, and seemingly half of her hometown church. His mother had been worried about the culture clash, but she needn't have been. Diamond's family brought warmth and joy and an incredible amount of soul food to the reception, and by the end of the night, Dubin's father was attempting to learn the electric slide while Diamond's mother taught Suyun how to make proper cornbread. This is perfect, Diamond said, watching their families mingle. She was radiant, her natural hair in an elaborate updo, her makeup perfect, tears of joy running down her face. It is, Dubin agreed, unable to look away from his wife. His wife. The word still felt surreal. They honeymooned in Bali, 2 weeks of beaches and privacy and the kind of intimacy that came from being completely comfortable with each other. Dubin painted her portrait one afternoon while she napped on their villa's deck, capturing the way the sun turned her skin golden, the peaceful expression on her face. When she woke and saw it, she cried. It's beautiful. You're so talented. I'm inspired, he said simply. They returned to Seoul and settled into married life. Diamond continued her practice, becoming known as one of the premier relationship therapists in the city. Dubin threw himself into work with renewed energy, innovating in ways his father grudgingly admitted were not entirely terrible. They bought a house with a studio for Dubin's painting and a home office for Diamond's practice. They adopted a dog, a rescue named Jazz, who became their spoiled baby. And through it all, they navigated their unique situation with humor, honesty, and creativity. You know what I love about us? Diamond said one evening 2 years into their marriage. They were curled up on the couch, Jazz snoring between them, watching rain fall outside their windows. What? We had to build our intimacy from scratch. We couldn't rely on traditional expectations or societal norms. We had to figure out what worked for us. And I think that's made us stronger. We communicate better than any couple I've counseled. Well, you are a therapist. It would be embarrassing if we didn't communicate well. She swatted his arm. I'm being serious. I know your condition was something you saw as a curse for so long. But in some ways it's been a gift. It forced us to be creative and intentional. It made us build something unique that's entirely ours. Dubin pulled her closer. I love you, Diamond Park. You know that, right? I know. And I love you too. All of you. Every part. Even the parts that traumatized all my ex-girlfriends? Especially those parts. They led you to me after all. She kissed him softly. Now stop fishing for compliments and tell me what you want for dinner. You. That's not a dinner option. It should be. She laughed, and the sound filled their home with warmth and joy and the kind of love that comes from truly knowing someone, flaws and all, and choosing them anyway. Because that's what love is really. Not finding someone perfect, but finding someone perfect for you. Someone who sees your cracks and broken pieces and says, "I'm not going anywhere." Dubin had spent years believing he was unlovable because of his condition. It took a brilliant, beautiful, unflappable therapist from Atlanta to show him the truth. He wasn't broken. He was just waiting for the right person to meet him exactly where he was. And Diamond Richardson, now Diamond Park, was exactly the right person. She stayed when others had run. She loved when he'd given up hope. She saw past the curse to the man beneath. And together they built a life that was messy and imperfect and absolutely perfect for them. Which is really all anyone can ask for. The gallery opening was packed with Seoul's art elite, all gathered to see the debut solo exhibition of Dubin Park, the billionaire who'd surprised everyone by becoming a serious painter. Diamond stood beside her husband, one hand resting on her pregnant belly, watching people admire his work. The paintings were stunning. Landscapes of Seoul, intimate portraits, abstract pieces that captured emotion in color and light. "You did it," she whispered to him. "You really did it." "We did it," he corrected, taking her hand. "None of this happens without you. I just encouraged you to pick up a brush again. You did so much more than that." He pulled her close, careful of her belly. "You gave me my life back. You gave me permission to be whole." She kissed him softly, not caring that half of Seoul's art world was watching. "And you gave me a love I didn't think existed. I'd say we're even." Their daughter kicked and they both laughed, Dubin's hand joining Diamond's on her belly. They'd been told the pregnancy might be complicated given their unique situation, but so far everything was progressing normally. In 3 months they'd welcome a little girl they were naming Grace, because that's what their love had been for both of them. "Grace, should we go look at the sales numbers?" Diamond asked. "Your mother keeps texting me asking if you've sold anything yet." 5 paintings in the first hour, Dubin said with a grin. Suyun already called to gloat that she bought the biggest one. Of course she did. They walked through the gallery hand in hand, accepting congratulations, discussing commissions, being the power couple that no one had expected them to become. Later, after the crowds had thinned and they were finally alone, they stood in front of Dubin's favorite painting in the collection. It showed a woman in a jazz club, her eyes closed, a small smile on her face as she swayed to music only she could hear. The painting captured joy in its purest form, unguarded, genuine, beautiful. "That's my favorite," Diamond said softly. "I know. Too. That first night at the club, before you became my fiancée, my wife, my everything. That moment when I knew my life was about to change forever." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Best impulsive decision I ever made. Best impulsive decision we both made." They stood there for a long moment, two people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd built something beautiful from what others had seen as brokenness. They'd faced judgment, skepticism, and their own fears. But they'd faced it all together. And in the end, that's what had made all the difference. Not his wealth or her education or his looks or her skill. Just two people choosing each other, day after day, in all the messy, complicated, beautiful ways that love requires. "Ready to go home?" Dubin asked finally. "Ready," Diamond said. And together, hand in hand, they walked into the Seoul night, ready for whatever came next. Because they were in it together. And that made them unstoppable.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel. Click on the notification icon so that you will get notified whenever a new story is posted. Also leave us a like, comment, and share to others who love good stories.